In the vast and often confusing landscape of modern spirituality and self-help, there is one myth that stands as a shimmering sacred monument: the quest for the authentic self. You know its song well, for it has been whispered to you from 1,000 different sources. It is the story of a perfect, pristine, true self that resides deep within you, a flawless diamond buried beneath the accumulated mud and rubble of social conditioning, parental expectations, and personal trauma. The journey of your life, according to this myth, is a great archaeological dig. Your work is to excavate this hidden treasure, to chip away the false layers, to peel back the masks, until you finally unearth the radiant, unchanging essence of who you really are. Once you find this authentic self, the story goes, you will have found your purpose, your peace, your permanent home. It is a beautiful, comforting, and deeply compelling story. It gives us a map, a destination, a sense of ultimate order in a chaotic world. It assures us that beneath our anxieties, our contradictions, and our perceived failings, there is a core of perfection waiting to be reclaimed. But here, at the very threshold of our inquiry, we must pause and ask the most terrifying, most liberating question imaginable. What if it is all a lie? What if this entire noble quest for your authentic self is the most sophisticated illusion of them all? A beautiful cage that keeps you from the terrifying, breathtaking truth of your own existence. This is the stark, bracing challenge thrown down by the great existentialist philosophers, and it is the heart of our journey today. The title of this exploration is Why Your Authentic Self is an Existentialist Lie. Not as a cynical dismissal, but as a profound invitation. It is an invitation to stop digging for a treasure that was never buried, and to turn your gaze instead to the awesome, empty, and creative power that is in your hands right now. To do this, we must first learn a new way of seeing, a discipline for looking at our own experience with radical honesty. This tool is phenomenology. It asks us to set aside the beautiful stories we tell ourselves, including the story of the hidden true self, and to simply describe the raw, unfiltered experience of what it is like to be a conscious being. When we do this, we do not find a static, unchanging diamond within. We find a constant, fluid, and often contradictory stream of thoughts, feelings, choices, and performances. We discover that we are not a fixed noun but a continuous verb. Once we have seen this flux with phenomenological clarity, we arrive at the doorstep of existentialism. If phenomenology shows us that our self is not a fixed thing, existentialism grapples with the staggering implications of this fact. If there is no pre-existing blueprint, no innate essence that defines who we are, then our most cherished quest is rendered meaningless. The search is over because there was nothing to find, and in the silent void left behind, an immense and terrifying freedom is born. This is the core of the existentialist revelation. Existence precedes essence. You are not born as something, you are simply born. You are thrown into existence, a conscious, questioning being in a silent universe. And from that moment on, it is your choices, your actions, and your commitments that create who you are. So, the authentic self is an existentialist lie, not because authenticity is impossible, but because the popular conception of it is based on a false premise. It assumes authenticity is a state of finding something. Existentialism teaches that authenticity is a state of creating something. It is not about excavating a pre-existing identity, but about courageously authoring your own moment by moment in the full, anxious awareness that no other blueprint exists. This exploration, therefore, is a call to abandon the comfortable, passive role of the archaeologist of the self, and to take up the terrifying, exhilarating role of the artist of the self. Are you brave enough to let go of the comforting promise of a self that is waiting to be found, in order to embrace the radical freedom of a self that is waiting to be built? To understand why the notion of a true self is a lie, we must first understand the prison it creates. This is the prison of essences, the cage of predefinition that tells you what you are before you have had a chance to become. It is a cage built from the well-meaning but heavy bars of parental expectation, the rigid steel of societal labels, the cold iron of your own past habits. You are a doctor, you are a parent, you are introverted, you are irresponsible, you are a success, you are a failure. Each label, each essence, while offering a sense of identity and place, also draws a boundary around your infinite potential, creating a cell that can become comfortable, familiar, and ultimately, suffocating. The first tool for escape, then, is not an act of building, but of destruction. It is the phenomenological method of bracketing. It is the violent, necessary act of taking the hammer of your focused awareness and shattering the cage of assumptions. It is the courageous decision to set aside, just for a moment, all the stories you've been told about who you are supposed to be, and to look at your raw, unfiltered experience. When you perform this act of deconstruction, when the bars of your prison lie in fragments around you, you are left standing in a stark, new kind of silence. And in this silence, you discover a fundamental truth about your own mind. You discover that your consciousness is not a passive mirror, merely reflecting the world. It is an active, searching beam of light, a principle the phenomenologists called intentionality. Your consciousness is never empty. It is always directed at something. It intends, it perceives, it projects, it confers meaning upon the world. It is not a noun, it is a verb. This realization is crucial, for it shifts you from being a passive object in the world to an active subject, a center of perception from which reality is constantly being interpreted and engaged. And once you stand in this active, unveiled awareness, you are finally ready to confront the central truth of existentialism, the great revelation that is the source of both your freedom and your terror. Existence precedes essence. You were not created like a knife, with the predefined essence of cutting. You were not built from a divine blueprint that dictates your ultimate purpose. You were, instead, simply thrown into existence. Imagine a vast cosmic factory producing an endless line of identical featureless blank mannequins. That is you, at birth. You simply exist. And now, in this stark, silent world, with no instruction manual and no given purpose, you face the staggering task of carving your own face, of building your own essence, from the raw material of your choices, your actions, and your commitments. This understanding leads us to the three great burdens, which are also the three great glories of the human condition. The first is absolute, terrifying freedom. With no blueprint, no preordained path, every direction is possible, and every choice is entirely your own. This is not the gentle freedom of choosing between two pleasant options on a menu. It is the vertigo of the void, the paralyzing realization that your choices are utterly, completely, terrifyingly yours to make, and that no one, no God, no system can make them for you. This crushing freedom gives birth to the second burden, total responsibility. If you are free to create your own essence, then you and you alone are responsible for the person you become. You are your own sculptor, and the chisel is in your hand with every choice you make. You cannot blame your parents, your society, your genetics, or a distant God for the final form of the statue. Every act of courage adds to its nobility. Every act of cowardice subtracts from it. You are condemned to be the author of your own character, a weight so immense it can be difficult to bear. And this immense weight of freedom and responsibility gives birth to the third great feeling, existential angst. This is not the everyday anxiety of deadlines or social fears. It is the fundamental background anxiety of a conscious being aware of its own groundlessness. It is the dizziness of the tightrope walker who looks down and realizes for the first time that there is no net. This angst, this dread, is not a pathology to be cured, but a sign that you are awake to the truth of your condition. The comforting lie of the authentic self is an anesthetic against this feeling. It provides the illusion of a safety net. But the existential path demands that you stare into the abyss, that you accept the absence of the net, and that you learn to find your balance without it, through the sheer strength and integrity of your own chosen path. How then does one live with this terrifying freedom, this crushing responsibility, this constant background hum of angst? How does one build a self in a universe that provides no blueprint, no divine instruction manual for a life well lived? The ancients, grappling with these same abyssal questions, did not always write theories. Sometimes they told stories, crafting myths that contained within their symbolic narratives a deep and enduring wisdom. And there is one myth, above all others, that serves as the perfect stark allegory for our existential condition, a story that holds the very key to transforming the terror of freedom into a life of profound authentic meaning, the myth of Sisyphus. You may know the tale. Sisyphus was a king of cunning and defiance who dared to cheat death and chain the gods. For his hubris, his punishment was not one of simple, fleeting torture, but of an exquisitely crafted eternal meaninglessness. He was condemned for all time to push a colossal boulder up a steep hill, a task of immense all-consuming effort. With every fiber of his being, with muscles straining and spirit groaning, he would strain against its impossible weight, his entire existence narrowed to this single agonizing task. And after a great and heroic struggle, he would finally reach the very summit, the peak of the hill, gasping for a breath of completion. But just as he was about to savor that single precious moment, the boulder would, by its own inexorable weight, tip over the edge and thunder back down into the depths of the underworld from which it came. His work was, and would always be, for nothing. His victory was, and would always be, an illusion. His life was condemned to be an endless cycle of futile labor and hopeless repetition. This, the philosopher Albert Camus tells us, is the portrait of the absurd hero. Sisyphus is the human condition laid bare, a conscious being born into a world without an inherent divine script, performing tasks whose ultimate meaning is not provided by the gods or the universe. From the outside, his life is the very definition of a living hell. But for Camus, the story does not end in despair. In fact, the most important moment in this entire myth is the one we so often overlook. It is not the pushing of the rock, nor the moment of its fall. It is the pause. It is the breath Sisyphus takes at the top of the hill. It is the hour of his consciousness, as he turns and walks back down the slope to retrieve his stone. His fate is no longer acting upon him. He is walking beside it. In this moment, he is fully aware of the whole extent of his wretched condition. He sees his destiny clearly, without illusion, without hope for appeal. This lucidity, which should be his greatest torment, is also, paradoxically, the very space where his victory becomes possible. For there is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn. By choosing to walk back down that hill, by consciously accepting his reality in its totality, Sisyphus reclaims his existence from the gods. He makes the rock his thing. The struggle becomes his struggle. He is no longer a passive victim of his punishment. He is the conscious subject of his own absurd life. And this is why Camus famously and radically concludes, one must imagine Sisyphus happy. His happiness is not a shallow cheerfulness, but a grim, defiant, and profound joy. It is a happiness born from finding meaning in the struggle itself, from creating value in a world that offers none. By scorning his fate and loving it as his own, he transcends it. You, in your life, are Sisyphus. The boulder is your existence, your job, your relationships, your daily challenges, your secret sorrows. The feeling of meaninglessness and despair often comes from the mistaken assumption that there should be a divine script for your struggle, a pre-written purpose that you have simply failed to find. Existentialism reveals the stark truth. The script is absent. The gods are silent. The universe offers no inherent meaning for the pushing of your particular boulder. And in this stark, silent truth lies your ultimate liberation. Your freedom is found in the moment you, like Sisyphus, stop looking to the heavens for a reason, and instead, create one for yourself. You choose to love your fate, to push your boulder with defiance, with integrity, with a style that is uniquely your own. Authenticity is not about finding your pre-written role in an ancient play. It is about waking up to the truth that the stage is bare, the audience is empty, and you are the sole author of the script, writing it, heroically, with every conscious, courageous step up the hill. To imagine Sisyphus happy is a profound philosophical act, but to create your own happiness, your own meaning from the raw and often difficult material of your life requires more than just imagination. It requires a set of practical conscious arts. The journey from passively accepting your fate to actively choosing it is the very essence of practical existentialism. It is the movement from merely seeing your condition to authentically being the author of your response to it. This is where philosophy ceases to be a theory and becomes a path, a way of life, built upon courageous and disciplined inner practices that allow you to find freedom even in the face of necessity. The first of these arts is the practice of phenomenological observation, which is the art of seeing your boulder for what it truly is. Before you can choose to love your struggle, you must first see it clearly, stripped of the layers of judgment, complaint, and narrative you have wrapped around it. Choose one boulder in your life, a challenging job, a difficult relationship, a chronic limitation. For one day, commit to observing it without the familiar labels of good or bad, fair or unfair. Instead, become a meticulous phenomenologist of your own experience. When you engage with it, what are the raw sensations in your body? A tightness in the chest, a heat in the face, a wariness in the bones. What are the precise emotional currents? Not sadness, but a hollow ache here, a surge of heat there. What are the thoughts that arise, observed as neutral events, like clouds passing in the sky? This practice of non-judgmental, descriptive observation is the first step toward freedom. It detaches you from your suffering just enough to see the cage before you try to open its door. You stop being the prisoner and become the witness of the prison, and in that shift of perspective, power begins to return to you. Once you have seen your reality with this stark clarity, you are ready for the second practice, identifying your bad faith. This term, coined by the great existentialist Jean-Paul Sartre, describes the myriad ways we lie to ourselves to escape the terrifying burden of our own freedom. Bad faith is the act of pretending you are not free. It is the voice within that whispers, "I have no choice. I have to do this. It's just the way I am. They made me feel this way." It is the act of seeing yourself as a determined object, a thing acted upon by the world, rather than a free subject who chooses their response. Like Sisyphus blaming the steepness of the hill or the weight of the rock, we engage in bad faith when we place responsibility for our inner state onto external circumstances. The practical exercise here is one of ruthless self-honesty. Where in your life are you pretending you have no choice? What situation do you complain about as if you are its helpless victim? To identify your own bad faith is a painful but liberating moment, for in seeing the lie, you are forced to confront the awesome and terrifying truth of your own freedom and responsibility in the matter. From this confrontation with your own freedom, the final and most creative act emerges: the choosing of an authentic project. This is the existential answer to the meaninglessness of the universe. If there is no pre-written script for your life, then you must become the playwright. You must create your own meaning. An authentic project is not necessarily a grand ambition, like building a cathedral or writing a masterpiece, though it can be. It is any course of action, any way of being, that you have chosen freely from your own self-examined values, rather than one inherited from the expectations of others. It is the conscious decision to be a compassionate parent, an integrous professional, a devoted student of wisdom, a kind stranger, not because you should, but because you have freely chosen this as the meaning you will carve into your existence. This is how you, like Sisyphus, make the boulder your thing. You choose how you will push it. You can push it with resentment, or you can choose to make the pushing an act of defiant strength, a meditation on resilience, a dance of rebellion. Your authentic project is the why that you create, which gives you the power to endure anyhow. Through these integrated practices, seeing clearly, owning your freedom, and authoring your own meaning, you cease to be a character searching for a lost script. You become the author, the actor, and the director, transforming the absurd tragedy of an unexamined life into a profound and authentic work of art. We began this exploration by taking a beautiful and cherished idea, the notion of a hidden authentic self, and holding it up to the harsh, clarifying light of existential inquiry. We saw how this comforting myth, while offering a sense of safety and purpose, can ultimately become a gilded cage, preventing us from engaging with the profound reality of our own creative power. We learned to use the phenomenological lens to strip away the stories and see our experience for what it is, a constant, fluid, and often contradictory stream of being. We then faced the core tenets of existentialism, understanding that our existence precedes our essence, and that we are born into a radical freedom that brings with it an immense responsibility and a background hum of cosmic angst. Finally, in the myth of Sisyphus, we found our guide, a hero who teaches us not to escape our fate, but to create meaning by consciously, defiantly, and lovingly embracing it as our own. We have seen that the path to an authentic life is not one of discovery, but of courageous, moment-to-moment creation. Now, at the end of our journey, we must ask, what does it mean to live this truth? What is the ultimate call to action issued by this profound and unsettling philosophy? The first call is to embrace the abyss. The realization that there is no pre-written script, no inherent universal meaning, no true self waiting to be found can feel like stepping off a cliff into a bottomless void. And it is. But the great secret of the existentialist path is that this void is not a nihilistic emptiness. It is a creative emptiness. It is the perfect, silent black canvas upon which any masterpiece can be painted. The absence of a universal meaning is not a curse. It is the greatest gift the universe could have possibly given you, for it grants you the divine, untrammeled freedom to author your own. The transformational call is to stop fearing this void and to see it instead as the ultimate testament to your liberty. This leads to the second, more personal call, the call to courageous authorship. You must, from this moment forward, see yourself not as a reader searching for your part in a play that has already been written, but as the playwright themselves, sitting before a blank page with a pen in your hand. The life you have lived up to this point may have been a passive reaction to the scripts handed to you by your family, your culture, your fears. But authenticity begins now, with the conscious choice to write the next scene yourself. It is the decision to choose your values, not based on what is approved of, but based on what resonates with your own hard-won inner truth. It is the commitment to an authentic project, the deliberate act of building a life that reflects these chosen values, even if it is difficult, even if it is lonely, even if no one else understands it. To live this way is not to find a permanent state of easy happiness. An authentic existential life is often heavier, more fraught with the weight of conscious choice, than an unexamined one. It is a life lived with the constant quiet awareness of your own mortality, your own groundlessness. But it is also a life that is truly, vibrantly, and profoundly yours. It is a life where even suffering can have meaning, because it is a suffering you have chosen to face with integrity. It is the difference between being a slave dragged by a boulder and being Sisyphus, who by making the struggle his own transforms it into a monument to the resilience and defiance of the human spirit. Therefore, let go of the search. The person you were looking for is not hidden in a cave or buried under layers of trauma. That self does not exist yet. It is waiting to be born from the choices you make today. The most authentic thing about you is not a static self you can find, but the dynamic, terrifying, and glorious freedom you possess to create one. The universe has given you the raw materials of existence and the stunning responsibility of your own consciousness. The greatest act of rebellion against meaninglessness, the greatest act of love for your own being, is to have the courage to build a soul from the clay of your own free will.